All right, good morning, good evening, good night. It is another episode of the Layer 1 podcast. Listen, I got some good news. I got some bad news. The good news is I have Pastel here. I have Anthony Georgiades, CEO and co-founder, who is going to put down a great conversation today. And we're going to talk about NFT marketplaces. We're going to talk about their Layer 1 protocol that they're building specific for NFTs. But I do have some bad news. Last episode of Layer 1 ever. We're not going anywhere. We're just rebranding to the NFTYQ show, more NFT focused. But it's been a wild ride. Anthony, you are the last guest on the Layer 1 podcast. What do you think about that?
Oh, I'm honored. I'm honored.
Awesome, man. Well, I'm going to give a quick shout out to our sponsor, BitLecture Labs. They have a Dreamers NFT PFP drop here at the end of the month. Love the team over there. They have a great product with their Dream Loops, and as well as that Dreamers drop that is going at the end of the month. So big shout out to BitLecture Labs and what they're building. We also host a metaverse event with them, so check that out at the end of the month. It's going to be a good time. But in today's conversation, like I said, guys, we are going to have Pastel Network. They're building a purpose-built NFT protocol, Layer 1, so it's very fitting. But Anthony, man, how are you doing today, and are you excited about this NFT space that's blowing up?
I'm doing great. Of course, super pumped. Every day, things are just growing at, honestly, it seems like just like light speed. It's crazy how fast stuff is evolving, and just so many great teams just building and contributing to the ecosystem.
Yeah, absolutely, man. We're going to make it to Pastel Network, of course. You're going to break down what you guys are doing from a tech perspective. You seem to have a great team there. But let's start with the background. I always like diving into episodes before I actually talk with the guests. And you talked about working at Golem and being in the ICO space back in the day. I mean, those are fun times. I loved them. It seems like light years ago. But how was your kind of intro into the space? And then how have you gotten yourself into NFTs?
Yeah, you know what? I was studying computer science at Penn in grad school, and I started, as you alluded to, developing for some early projects at the time, and ended up getting involved from kind of an investment capacity at Innovating Capital. We started investing in the space back in 2016. I had been involved just kind of from more of a technical perspective, late 14, 15. And since then, it's crazy to see how just the ecosystem in general has evolved. 2017 feels literally like a different lifetime versus what things are now. Even when we founded Pastel, it feels like forever ago. So it's been a crazy ride, an amazing journey, but everything is just continuing to progress every day, and I love what's happening.
Yeah, I love talking stories and kind of just times in 2017, right? So you got into the space in 2016. What was your investment thesis back then as it relates to crypto? I know you were part of a couple investment firms, I believe, as well. So what was your investment thesis back then as it's related to crypto?
You know what? To be completely honest, I went 180. So a few friends at the time were pushing the Ethereum ICO. I was a little bit skeptical of the future of Ethereum and its applications, but I actually listened to a podcast with an A16Z podcast in late 2014, and I just kind of had more of a 180 flip. It was kind of a light bulb that just, all right, this actually has real application, real purpose. This general idea of kind of Web3, basically the democratization of applications just beyond maybe just transmitting money or store value, is definitely real, and there's a huge market for it, right? Companies like Stellar that were solving cross-border remittances, obviously businesses like Golem, providing obviously compute and just network resources to anyone in the world. It was really exciting to see basically how to disintermediate so many different applications, so many different aspects of the world, really. So obviously the use cases are endless, and you really have to think big, because it's not a general kind of market sizing. Hey, we can kind of take over. If you look at kind of like the compute market today, it's X trillion dollars, and we can capture 50% of that. It's completely different, right? Because you're literally creating an entirely new market, a new avenue for users, consumers, enterprises, to garner resources and market share from different applications on a global scale.
Yeah, so where was that 180 at? You went for the applications, and then how did you make your way into NFTs?
NFTs made, they made a lot of sense, because if you think about just what I was talking about, the democratization of intermediaries and middlemen, I met the CEO of Pastel, who is just a brainiac and really just a visionary in the NFT space. And the general thesis at the time was, look, the art world as kind of the core example of one aspect of NFTs, right? But the general contemporary art world has been, filled and rife with just general fraud, manipulation, and basically just lack of access for the common artist, the aspiring artist, etc. It's run by auction houses, collectors, etc., and just an entire supply chain of middlemen. And for the first time in the world, blockchain could actually empower this concept of digital art, and then also provide for a direct peer-to-peer transfer or application where any creator anywhere in the world can, create and sell a piece of art with just an iPhone, right? And that kind of general concept was really exciting to me. And obviously the core aspect of blockchain and NFTs in particular as a kind of a token standard actually made it, practical.
Yeah, so you guys could have taken the route of, okay, let's build our own marketplace, let's build our own application, right? But you went in the big mode, or you went with the big vision in building your own layer one protocol specific for NFTs, which I think is awesome. Like, I just from the ground up with NFTs in mind, I really like a flow network, for example. Like, I like people that just from the bottom of the structure, the infrastructure, you're thinking about NFTs. So I guess we are, at the point of the conversation. What is Pastel Network, and what are you guys doing here today?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of alluded to it, right? We had a big vision. We wanted to just really think big. And at the onset, just for some kind of quick context and history, we had obviously a number of early NFT applications, CryptoKitties, Rare Pepe, etc. And it became very clear upfront that there were a number of issues prevalent and still pervasive to this day, just in terms of the broader ecosystem. Network congestion, high transaction fees, scalability constraints, and then the lack of really being able to provide specific on-chain features without necessarily maybe dedicated side chains or parachains, in the form of, let's say we wanted to launch, our own duplicate detection protocol, right? So generally speaking, we wanted to, the general vision has always been to basically bundle up every aspect of what it means to actually be an NFT from the ground up, and our own dedicated layer one protocol.
Yeah, so kind of break down Pastel Network and what is happening today. So you guys launched, I believe you said in 2018. You have a marketplace coming up near, I believe, the end of the year. So kind of take me through what is happening in the ecosystem today with Pastel Network for people that are interested.
Yeah, so we founded Pastel in 2018, and we launched our mainnet earlier this year, with kind of the core underlying protocols, and it took a lot of time to build out, right? So generally speaking, fully functional mainnet with dedicated aspects to the system itself. And so, for example, the way that we really position ourselves is anybody around the world can, whether you're a Fortune 500, whether you're a general enterprise, whether you're an existing layer 2 marketplace, you can basically launch, build, run your own dedicated white label solution, NFT marketplace, whatever it might be, directly on Pastel. Simultaneously, you can leverage one or more of our specific protocols and features. So for example, one thing that is really exciting that we've started to really partner and integrate with a lot of different companies with is our new duplicate NFT detection protocol, which is pretty awesome. So basically, it's probably one of the most differentiating aspects of the system in particular. Anytime a user registers an NFT or activates an NFT on Pastel, we take the underlying file, and we leverage a number of deep learning methodologies to transform that file into an inherent fingerprint, which you can think about as kind of a long vector list of numbers, 10,000 plus different numbers. That fingerprint is then basically assessed. We take the correlation using statistical methodologies of that fingerprint versus all other fingerprints on the kind of inputted database itself. And that could be NFTs on Pastel, could be collaborative platforms, could literally be a reverse image search on the entire internet. And we output a score from 0 to 100%, designating how rare that actual NFT is. So you can kind of think through how that can really extend itself to different applications to prevent fraud, outright scams, etc. Really protecting users against and really collectors as well, We've seen people rip off collections from Solana, deploy them on Ethereum. And so it's definitely one of those things that we recognize would be a challenge and a problem, and we've set out to solve.
Yeah, you mentioned Solana there. We had Anatoly on, I believe, at the beginning of this year. And I have to stop myself with layer one protocols because there is this idea that network effect is really important, right? It's important for anything, but for a layer one protocol, you guys are creating all this infrastructure, but it doesn't matter if you can't garner the community, right? If you can't gather these people in there. So what are you guys doing to set yourself apart from, I like how you talked about no competitors. You were kind of growing this pie together, but how do you set yourself apart from other people building in the NFT space, specifically layer one protocols?
Yeah, you've mentioned it completely right. There's really no competitors right now. It's one of those situations where everyone is collaborating and contributing to a broader ecosystem. So it's amazing just the reception that really we have with, you can name any layer two marketplace, another layer one blockchain, and the different avenues we're exploring, different paths of integration. And so, for us, what's most important is the point of friction and the accessibility in terms of being able to access the protocols. And so it was important for us to do it in a way that was, super lightweight, very, very scalable, so that anybody could really come and onboard, leveraging one or more of the actual protocols itself, as simple as possible. And simultaneously, we really, really kind of prioritize the concept of interoperability. So a focus of ours has been, yes, we are our own layer one blockchain itself, but how can we actually make these NFTs interoperable across other chains? And obviously, you have platforms like Solana with Wormhole that have been focused on similar concepts as well. But continuing to think through these bridges and basically roll them out one by one, it kind of lends itself to this broader ecosystem that for all intents and purposes provides a vast path to network effects as well.
I love the idea of having interoperable assets. We're not there yet, obviously. We're just at the beginning there of kind of unlocking Web3. I love the analogy as well. I don't know if somebody I heard from on Twitter, or it's kind of an acquaintance that kind of brought this to me, but really Halo and Xbox, and kind of talking about these consoles and games as the layer one protocols and the apps. I needed an Xbox because I wanted to play Halo. And so, having Top Shot on Flow, for example, you almost need to be on Flow to access the Top Shot. So I know that was kind of a roundabout way of asking this question, but where is your Halo? What is going to be the initiatives you guys take to attract these dApps, and then have all these users flow into the protocol?
Yeah, no, actually, I really like that analogy. That's a good one. There are certain aspects to it as well, though, because it'd be as if, right, Xbox can leverage, in your analogy, Xbox can leverage, I don't know, something from Nintendo to basically provide that feature to Halo. And so the point is, Dapper Labs could basically effectively leverage our duplicate detection protocol for any dApp that they launch. Necessarily, it could be Flow, it could be whatever it might be, right? And so anytime an NFT is minted, even though it might be settling on kind of the actual, Flow itself, during that process, there's a kind of a connection via a very straightforward API or RPC call that basically is consistently talking to each other. And so in that case, right, there's a lot of power there to really actually be able to take these different protocols, have intercommunication, and really open up a lot of these different resources to the extent that 1 + 1 is greater than 10. So part of it has been designing the protocols in that respect and in that light to be easily integratable and interoperable across these different chains, like I alluded to. But yeah, I mean, the list of different kind of groups we're talking with, partnering with, integrating is it's pretty comprehensive, and I'm really excited about really getting a lot of that underway. So you ask how we get there, what do we do? It's continuing providing resources, being receptive. What do the users actually want? What are the specific features they want? How can we implement that? How can we be faster? How can we be better, scale faster, transact faster, right? And constantly evolving and building every day, and it's definitely starting to pay dividends.
Yeah, one of the pieces you mentioned that you guys are going to release relatively shortly here at the end of the year is your own marketplace, right? So, what does that look like right now? What are the kind of user statistics that we can expect right out of the gate? I know it takes a while to build a layer one protocol, and what you guys are doing is fantastic. But right now, that marketplace launches end of the year. What does that look like when it does?
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's a great question. We've basically been doing early beta signups with different users, and one thing that was important for us, just to kind of take a step back, as you've seen the markets, really taken off, right? And there's just a number of marketplaces out there. I think to some extent, it can be kind of confusing for digital artists, creators who are really starting to onboard into the ecosystem for the first time, right? Who do I choose? Where do I go, etc. So to that extent, we wanted to make sure that whatever we deployed, given where the market is today, was extremely user intuitive, very friendly, lacking any sort of kind of point of friction or barrier to entry, as easy as swiping a credit card, basically, so that the user could onboard without any sort of glitches or loss of continuity. And then from there, basically, they're onboarded into the broader crypto ecosystem, right? And so that was really our core objective. So the marketplace itself is really sleek, very, very much so user intuitive and very user friendly. So it's been pretty overwhelming to see kind of the interest in some of the early signups, and then basically going out and onboarding some tremendous artists that we already have kind of under our belt, such as the likes of Paul Gerben and Eric Zenner and whatnot. So it's been great.
So, from a perspective of kind of looking at your guys' vision as it related to Pastel, is it mainly art focused? There's a lot of these sub niches within this industry. Is it going to mainly be attacking the art focus, or is there going to be an opportunity for different gaming assets to be on the platform, different sports collectibles, or just collectibles in general, PFP projects to name the least? But is that kind of your focus? Is art specifically, or kind of taking a broader approach?
Anything and everything. So the core blockchain itself, and this is also important to understand, why we built it the way we did, because the core C node level, the core piece of blockchain, looks at any piece of data as an abstract blob, right? So it could be any sort of data type, any sort of data field, whatever it might be. We can parse, store, trade that asset itself. We focused on digital art in terms of obviously where we thought there was, a massive area to initially hit the market with different collectibles. But yeah, we're not necessarily biased to the data type. And I mentioned some of the early artists that we've onboarded, just given kind of, their profile and success in the space so far.
So you guys are launching the marketplace. There's OpenSea had a big scandal come out in the last 24 hours. We know Rareable's there with their Rari token. You guys have the PSL token. Can you take me through any token mechanics as it's related to the platform, how that's going to work from a user perspective? I think it's an interesting way to kind of bootstrap a network, right? OpenSea doesn't have a specific token related to itself, so I think it could help a network effect on a marketplace, for example, if you implement PSL. But what does that PSL token look like within your network?
Yeah, so it really powers every aspect of the network itself. So you could be, hypothetically Dapper Labs running the duplicate detection protocol, and you have to send PSL every time, basically, you mint an NFT to run that protocol itself. You could decide you wanted to stake a supernode, and provide resources and different validation, activation, registration, storage, to the network itself. You'll stake 5 million PSL and you'll earn part of the block reward as part of that. You could be a user on the marketplace and you could decide that you want to actually mint an NFT, trade that NFT. All of these different functions require the use of PSL. And certain of those transactions actually take a piece of the PSL and burn it. And so obviously that lends itself to a deflationary mechanism in the underlying network itself.
Awesome. Could you take me through the team real quick? You said on a couple of your interviews that you have a lot of full stack developers that really helps you guys out. Take me through what your team looks like here today.
Yeah. So just, kind of sort of for some backdrop, we were really always focused on building tech. So the team itself is very, very, very developer intensive. I talked about obviously our founder and CEO earlier on. The guy is, definitely has been the visionary of the platform since day one of really kind of where the future of this industry would be. And Jeff has been spending, countless hours a day basically building, rebuilding, kind of designing a number of these protocols, right, in terms of where they are. I'd say our CTO Alexi is a complete just badass. He's contributed to a number of different protocols in the space, for 8+ years. He's been a programmer for 30+ years and has just literally just grinded through this thing since day one. And on top of that, we have basically tens of different developers just contributing and building and providing different resources to the repos every day. I mean, you can go to the repo; it's public, and just see the contributions that are happening in real time, hourly, basically.
Yeah, I want to stay within Pastel Network before we make our way to like broader NFT talk a little bit. You mentioned on-chain storage in a couple of your interviews, as well as that fraud detection. So these are like two of your tenets, really, of saying, "Hey, we're building Pastel Network, and this is from the ground up with these two like problems in mind that we're looking to solve." How big of a problem is it right now out in the on Ethereum or some of these other layer ones or layer twos? In on-chain storage or within that fraud detection, just from your guys' perspective and experience?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's a couple of things, right? If you think about the general idea of storage itself, I think it's something that's starting to get talked about a bit more. We saw a lot of the rug pulls, right, where a user doesn't necessarily realize that when they're acquiring one of these, ERC 721 standards, they're only effectively acquiring the token ID. And that token ID, that contract itself might contain a hyperlink to a third-party server. It might leverage IPFS or Arweave or whatever it might be. But these are all external dependencies. They require basically the reliance upon external node maintainers and whatnot. And so from our standpoint, amongst a handful of other features as well that we've seen with IPFS pinning recently, but for us, it was really important to have the storage encapsulated in the system itself, so that that any NFT holder, it was tightly coupled between both the actual NFT itself and the core metadata of that NFT, right? There was no loss of continuity between the two. And so the way the storage system works at a high level, and I kind of referenced the concept of supernodes, effectively anytime a user registers an NFT on the platform, the way you can think about it is we take the NFT, we chop it up into a bunch of different blocks, we copy those blocks, and then we randomly distribute them to every single supernode on the network. So it's kind of like sharding in some instances. But in this case, right, you have basically a highly redundant permanent storage solution that's within the network itself. It's not relying on some third-party centralized server. It's not relying on some external dependency itself. So I think over time, users will definitely start to realize and probably be a little bit more picky in terms of the platforms that they use and leverage, just depending on how that metadata is stored itself. One thing too, some other applications, we've been exploring the concept of leveraging our storage system as kind of proof of store. So maybe they do rely on IPFS for the core settlement, but over time they're also sending that metadata to Pastel, and there's some sort of kind of proof of store to make sure that it actually matches up.
So is the idea to be kind of like a feature set protocol almost for other layer ones? Like we're getting back to this thing of like, hey, other protocols like Flow can use Pastel Network. Is that like a main goal for you guys, is to say, hey, let's build all these feature sets for the other protocols that maybe can't solve this issue?
Oh, for sure. I mean, look, it goes back to my kind of initial sentiment, right? We've been working on this stuff since 2018. A lot of platforms, and for good reason, have been really focused on the go-to-market strategy around kind of just getting users and being built on kind of the other applications. It's super easy to spin up a user-facing web app, right, and start trading and whatnot, and everything kind of settles on Ethereum or is reliant on some centralized API, right? But effectively, these specific tools that we've built, we definitely think that there's a purpose and place for them across a number of these existing platforms. And from our standpoint, it's about basically contributing to the broader ecosystem as it is today. If you're a user or creator on Rarible or Flow, it doesn't really matter, right? We want to make sure that those NFT collectors and creators are protected. They have basically the sufficient storage capabilities that they should have, and that they're really entitled to, right? And so it's all about kind of contributing, right?
Fraud detection is another piece that I wanted to touch on. You mentioned it earlier in the episode. We generally have the idea, right, that fraud is a problem. People are getting rugged on OpenSea with non-verified accounts and things like this. OpenSea has, been attacking different features, but it's still a problem in the industry. But from your guys' perspective and just information that I can garner from you guys, is there any like high level data that you can give me, or just give me a kind of sense of how bad this is? Because we see it, but we're not in it like you guys are, from like saying, hey, we're trying to solve this issue.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's definitely rampant in the industry, right? It's super easy to, I could go on, pull a JPEG off of, any existing platform like, Solana, for example, and basically change it. Let me kind give you one example. So the general idea of kind of like a perceptual hash is effectively the way that a computer now for a lot of these platforms will tell if a photo is different, right? But if I take a static image and I make an invisible change, right? Or if I change a pixel, if I crop it ever so slightly, the intrinsic photo file is different, the perceptual hash is different, but at the end of the day, it's the same file, right? From a human eye, and so platforms that rely on that concept, it's become quite frivolous, right? And I don't need to tell you, right? You can start to scan through some of these platforms, and you can see for yourself, right? The same photo, or the same NFT that's listed by different creators, right, or across different platforms. It's all right there in front of you, and so it's one of those things where, yes, that's going to continue, but hey, how can we actually provide a sense of validation, right? Maybe it's a unique rareness score, which is exactly what our protocol provides, right? Where 98% rare or 100% rare or whatever it might be, right? Or a platform might say, hey, as long as it's 85% or greater, I'm just going to put a stamp that says this is certainly rare or certifiably rare. This is the creator's original piece. And so for us, that kind of general concept is where we do think that the industry is going. And having this all done in a decentralized fashion with no intermediary, no person curating the actual platform itself is completely imperative.
Yeah, that rarity score, is that just taking the supply or some type of mathematical equation? Because I know rarity can be subjective when it comes to some things. Like an artist can almost create something, and maybe the community says, no, this is actually rare. How does that rarity score kind of work in function?
Yeah. So remember the example I gave you with how we take the file, we turn it into a fingerprint, and then we basically take that correlation. So it's basically the output of a handful of different kind of correlation techniques that basically enable us to assess the rareness score. And the general idea is it's how do you think about rareness from kind of a human eye perspective, right? If you created a photo and I basically cropped it, right, or I just basically changed the color scheme, made it black or white, contour image effect, whatever it might be, something that it's clearly not rare from kind of a human eye.
Yeah.
Right.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. All right. Well, as far as Pastel is concerned, we touched on a lot of features there. Is there anything on the roadmap or anything that has to do with Pastel that we didn't touch on that you want to hit now?
I mean, look, we definitely touched on a lot. I would say, to the audience, follow us on Twitter, join our Telegram, and kind of stay up to date. We have a handful of exciting partnerships that are coming to fruition that we'll be announcing over the ensuing weeks. Obviously, the marketplace is imminent as well, so it's pretty exciting.
Awesome, man. I want to get your take on the NFT industry as a whole. First question: what is your favorite NFT that you own right now, or a couple?
It's a loaded question. The one that I own that I love, I own some pudgy penguins.
Good choice. There you go.
I love those things. Obviously, what the Bored Ape Yacht Club's doing is amazing as well. Kind of membership as community, and then I love what Burnt Banksy team's doing as well. Yeah, but yeah.
No. Go ahead. Keep going.
Yeah, but I was going to say, just from kind of the idea of kind of ownership as being part of a community, right? I own basically a Bored Ape. I now have access to this community. I basically get access to certain channels or certain airdrops of derivatives of that, and so it's a really cool concept to me in the NFT space. And we've been talking about it recently a lot in terms of how NFTs themselves can actually take away or just kind of evolve how we think about social media today. And I think this is probably the first, best example for me. Also, you have platforms like Axie Infinity from a gaming perspective, right? To me, it's phenomenal what platforms like that are doing. You look at users in literally Southeast Asia that are playing this game, their entire households are playing this game, and they're now able to actually earn rewards in the form of crypto, which gives them basically a wage rate that actually is far in excess of their basic ordinary income needs in that municipality, right? And they're actually, to me, it's basically you're able to actually start to put people on a more level playing field, just globally, right? So it's really cool to see the different applications and how kind of the market's evolved.
Yeah, I want to get your take here because I love the play to earn discussion. I love that people are earning a living playing the games that they love, but I also like taking the devil's advocate approach. I don't know why. Maybe it's just because I'm a host. I love asking questions, but there's another analogy that I'm going to butcher, which is in 1900, it was probably easier to predict that cars would exist, but not traffic jams. So what exactly could be a downfall maybe of like a play to like having people, earn and play and do all these things throughout the world on these gaming things where they're earning an actual income?
Yeah, I mean, look, obviously there's a lot of risk if for example, somebody was completely reliant upon that and, gave up basically another source of income for this game. And you have obviously the intrinsic spot risk associated with the currency that you're procuring, which is a huge aspect of it. Obviously, there's a underlying idiosyncratic risk that the platform fails, loss of users, or for example, the actual economic incentive to play the game changes drastically, right? So there's a number of variables that can impact that, but I'd say it's similar risks to a lot of industries as they exist today. I think just the general concept, though, of a new market that's being created and evolved, generally speaking, is probably outweighs some of kind of those risks at least, but definitely still a number of intrinsic risks. I wouldn't advise anyone to quit their day job and start
Yeah.
playing Axie Infinity all day.
I appreciate you scratching the gamer itch there for me. But as far as you are concerned, like what other things in NFTs, whether that be in a specific niche industry or just in general, what other things in NFTs interest you right now that you like to have a conversation about, or just kind of gets your mind thinking?
Yeah, I mean, look, I love the idea of fractionalization. Obviously, it's not a new concept. We've seen it in digital collectibles, memorabilia, real estate, even. But the general idea that groups can actually come together, spin up DAOs, and go out and decide what NFT to acquire. So now it's not necessarily just some large whale that decides they want to buy a $5 million CryptoPunk, right? It can be a group of individuals that are all contributing to it. So that excites me. Obviously, I hope that from kind of a regulatory compliance perspective, we get more guidance there. Just so we know how to kind of follow the rules there a little bit more, because right now it's kind of a bit of a gray zone in that respect. I think the concept of lending out NFTs is really cool. If I'm a CryptoPunk collector, I can actually take my NFT and transfer it to somebody else, and they can display it themselves and kind of have that for a temporary piece of time. But the current owner is not necessarily supposed to display it. And let's not forget too, right? If I own the NFT, I don't own the copyright, right? The copyright is still intrinsic and beholden to the creator itself. There's no transfer of copyright unless it's explicitly written in the contract itself. And so, to me, these kind of concepts of renting out the NFT and whatnot are pretty cool. And then just kind of broader applications, liquidity pools that are spinning up in the space, broader applications across real estate. I think Draper just kind of rented off or auctioned off an apartment as an NFT a couple weeks ago, which is really cool. So, anything that's kind of an immovable, still object or asset, whether it's a piece of insurance or an insurance policy, whether it's a fixed income, right? Whatever it might be, can in that respect can actually become an NFT. So it's pretty exciting to see kind of where the industry will evolve from here.
Yeah, I'm assuming those are all applications that can then be built on Pastel Network, of course.
That's the idea. That's
Yeah.
the idea.
Awesome, man. All right. Well, you kind of like led into my last question, or one of my last questions, which is where kind of is the NFT space here in the next 5 years? What is it? Well, I know that's completely hard to predict, but just in the maybe not near future, but a little bit more distant future, what does the NFT space look like from your perspective?
5 years, so like 50 real years.
Yeah, exactly. When we're 80.
Yeah. Basically, it's one of those things where I think we'll see a lot of enterprises actually starting to adopt NFTs in certain ways, whether it's actually as as crazy it might be, assets themselves, right? We saw, Visa, Anheuser-Busch, et cetera, different enterprises actually starting to literally acquire NFTs, holding them on their balance sheets and whatnot. But I think beyond that, more than just kind of the speculative asset aspect of it, it's more alongside of what they're actually going to do in the NFT world, right? And it goes back to those broader applications I mentioned, right? From finance to insurance to real estate. And so it's really more of the power of these token standards that can power a lot of real world enterprise consumer facing applications themselves, way beyond what we see today of pure digital collectibles and whatnot. I think the market where it's going to be in 5 years is going to be far more massive than what we see it as today. There was this concept of kind of STOs and kind of security tokens that I still think it's probably one of the least interesting kind of applications or concepts of blockchain themselves. But I do think that NFTs in particular, not directly, but from kind of an adjacent aspect of the market, can garner a potential aspect of a lot of that market share and applications that the security tokens were initially going after, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
I know.
well, yeah, aren't STOs fungible though? Aren't
Yes,
like
but for example, well, so for example, right, in a lot of instances, people looked at STOs as a way to basically, securitize a home per se, and somebody could actually trade that home. So I think what security tokens were trying to do in a lot of instances, in terms of the underlying applications themselves, are better suited for NFT token standards.
Got it. Okay. All right. Well, this has been a great conversation, man. You absolutely laid it down. The last thing I have for you is a book recommendation question. Could be crypto, non-crypto, anything that you got for the community here today.
Yeah, I mean, look, oh man, I just reread Flash Boys,
I
Michael
love that
Lewis.
book.
It's a great one. And then Coders is obviously another one that I just picked back up again. I don't read a lot of fiction per se, but I definitely love the stuff Michael Lewis has put out there. And I think Flash Boys is interesting. Just kind of, we're seeing, Jump, Virtue, a number, Tower, for example, starting to actually contribute to some of the high frequency actual data plays as it pertains to Solana and a few other platforms. And so kind of reminded me of where a lot of that started off. And so recently reread that book.
Is that stuff happening, you think, in crypto right now, where you have the NFT space that is like this fringe industry and it's being kind of front ran, and all these different things that happened kind of in Flash Boys, but maybe in a different way here in the NFT space?
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, look, there's so many different execution risks that take place. Front running, collision risks, slippage, right? All these things that are very commonplace in traditional markets are even more exasperated in the crypto markets. And so effectively, platforms, and I think a lot of this high frequency stuff is actually very, very healthy for the market, right? It basically tightens spreads, lends itself to price discovery. And so I think it's actually very helpful and progressive for the industry overall. And a lot of that's actually been occurring in the Solana sphere itself, just given obviously the block finality, as well as the transactions per second that take place on the chain itself, and just how fast everything settles. And then obviously the transaction fees are quite critical, because if you're clipping, 5 basis points, per side, if that at all, you don't want to pay more than a bip,
Yeah, 100%. Man, this has been a great convo. I appreciate you breaking down the Pastel Network. For everyone that's here today, they are launching a marketplace. They're already live with their Layer 1 protocol that's purpose-built for NFTs. We are definitely excited for everything that's happening there, man. Thank you so much for coming on today, Anthony. Again, co-founder, COO of the Pastel Network. Anything to say? This is the last episode, Layer 1 podcast, man. Anything to say before we hop out of here?
No, it's been an honor. Obviously, thanks for having me on here. I just say to the audience, as I mentioned before, follow us on Twitter, join the Telegram, and just obviously stay up to date to all the exciting news and progress that we're working on.
Awesome, man. Well, I'll have all the links in the description to Pastel for you guys to take a look at, those of you that are maybe listening on audio or after the show has been live. So, Anthony, thanks again, man. And we'll be back next week, NFTYQ show, rebranded at Layer 1 Podcast. Thanks again, Anthony.
Thanks.
All right.